Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Blitz NFL edition. I'm your host, Jeff Anderson. Co-host with me, Sam Dehring. Sam, how's it going, man?
I'm doing well, man. I mean, what better way to kick off the Blitz than, have our former Wisconsin defensive tackle and Isaiah Loudermilk. So I'm excited. Definitely go check that out. Wisconsin did have their pro day today. Wild Goose ran a, rapid, speedy 40. Loudermilk did well as well. So definitely go check that out. It's published earlier this week. But I'm doing well, man. I'm excited to break down, some franchise tags that already happened, as well as some key free agents, and then the Dak Prescott signings. That's obviously huge news this week.
Yeah, for sure. And I figure we could probably start with that because that's the biggest news of the week. So for anybody who did not hear about it, Dak Prescott just signed a 4-year, $160 million contract with the Dallas Cowboys, $66 million signing bonus. I think that's the highest in NFL history. 126 million of that is guaranteed. Average salary of $40 million. Sam, what are your initial thoughts to this contract?
So I've always been on the side of, does Dak deserve to get paid? Yes. Is he going to get paid what he deserves? No. He This does not surprise me at all. Quarterbacks are hard to come by. I figured the Cowboys would not have a choice. This is an insane contract. His first season, he's going to be making $75 million and averages, over $42 million a year over his first 3 seasons and a $66 million signing bonus, which I believe you mentioned, or guaranteed money, was the highest in NFL history. This dude changes the franchise. And to me, I've never been on the side as well of firing a head coach, a first-year head coach for the Dallas Cowboys, in Mike McCarthy after 1 season. And I definitely think he's going into this season on the hot seat. But they didn't have Dak Prescott, and Andy Dalton is a free agent. They only signed him to a 1-year deal, and Dak Prescott got his money. Now, who are we going to see traded next? I mean, this might be a topic of discussion now for a long time this offseason. And Russell Wilson tweeted out this morning. I'm sorry, I'm going off topic here, but Russell Wilson tweeted out this morning. It was a Bible quote, and it basically said, "Time for new, like the old is out and the new beginning is here." So, I, I mean, that's a hint to me in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. But that, and from what I'm hearing, from what I've been hearing as well, I want to say David Culley, the new Houston Texans head coach, did interview with the Texans this morning or yesterday, and it sounds like Watson's going to get traded. I personally am not so sure Watson plays it down in football next season if he's still on the Houston Texans. But going back to your point on Dak, I truly do not think the Cowboys had a choice. If Dak continues, if we were sitting here today and Dak was still, begging for a contract, holding out, we might see a guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick or Jacoby Brissett headed to Dallas for a 1-year deal, because I really don't see them shocking and taking a quarterback, in the first 2-3 rounds of the draft this season, or this come April. But this really doesn't surprise me, Jeff. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the same camp. Here's what I want to start off with first. I am happy that Dak got what I don't want to say deserved, but I'm happy that he got paid.
Right.
He was a 4th-round draft pick in 2016, basically took Tony Romo's starting job and has been getting paid essentially pennies up until this point. He gets franchise tagged 2 years ago, and then heading into this season, he has to kind of prove himself, but gets hurt, right? And I think everybody was kind of afraid, like, is Dak going to get paid? Like, it was a real conundrum for the Cowboys. But I think that they overpaid for him. But like you said, I don't think they had a choice. This kind of reminds me of in basketball, specifically with, let's just take an example with the Bucks real quick. The Bucks paid Chris Middleton close to a max contract, right? I would say that Chris Middleton isn't worth that max contract, but his worth to the team, that's how much he's worth, because the Bucks can't just go out and get another guy like Chris Middleton in free agency. So I think that this deal is very similar, in that regard, where the Cowboys had their hands tied. They don't have a high enough pick to get a guy like Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, even Trey Lance isn't going to fall to them, I think. So I think with the Dak signing, it at least guarantees that they get a good quarterback for the foreseeable future and aren't in like this quarterback limbo, especially with, I would argue, one of the better receiving cores in the league with Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, guys like that. And while they did overpay for him, I think, like you said, their hands were kind of tied.
Right, and like another thing to point out too is back to our point of stating quarterbacks are hard to come by. This contract dispute between Dak and the Dallas Cowboys should not have taken this long, in my opinion. They should have paid Dak before Zeke because running backs have shelf life. They should have paid Dak before Amari Cooper. I want to say Amari Cooper's was a 5-year, $100 million contract. They paid Jalen Smith. Jalen Smith is well-deserved. I would maybe say Jalen Smith is the only exception, but I personally would still put Dak at the top of that list. I think the order would go Dak, Jalen Smith, Amari Cooper, Zeke. And you saw a little bit of regression the past 2-3 seasons with the Dallas, or I mean a season or two with the Dallas Cowboys offensive line. And Zeke is still a stud, but Zeke has not played like a top 5 running back in the past 2 seasons, in my personal opinion. But I mean, with Dak's contract, they also don't have a ton of money to spend. Someone was tweeting earlier, shortly after the Dak contract, that they're worried about being able to afford Zeke's contract. And this might be an offseason where you might see a lot of building on for the draft. And the Cowboys, I think, are going to be one of those teams specifically.
Yeah, I had said in a YouTube video I posted on my personal channel, real quick, shameless plug, YouTube, The Sports Porch, go check it out. Anyway, I just uploaded a video about Dak Prescott, and I'd said in that video, the Dallas Cowboys draft this year is extremely important.
I agree.
Because of the fact that they don't have a lot in terms of money, because they have all these guys paid on the roster. I mean, just looking at it right now, DeMarcus Lawrence, $25 million. Dak Prescott, $22 million this year. Amari Cooper, $22 million. Zeke Elliott, $13 million. Like, they can't just afford to go out and get guys to fill their gaps. So this draft is going to be extremely important for the Cowboys to get it right. Luckily, I think that their first pick is pretty straightforward. You take either Caleb Farley or Patrick Surtain, depending on who you like more, if you're the Cowboys. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting offseason for the Cowboys. I think it's kind of make or break for their future.
Yeah, and I guess, 2 things. One, yeah, I think the cornerback obviously is make or break for them. They also could use an offensive lineman. I personally believe that Rashawn Slater, offensive tackle / guard / center, the dude can play anywhere on that offensive line. I think
that's true.
Not only I think he's the second best offensive lineman in this draft, right behind Penei Sewell, but I think he's a top 10 overall prospect in this draft. If Penei Sewell falls past the Cincinnati Bengals, which this is a team we'll get to next week when we cover more of these teams and preview their offseason and their draft picks, I would still, if I'm Cincinnati or the New York Jets, I would trade down in the top 10, more so the Jets, because I think if let's say Sewell's gone at 5, I would still select Rashawn Slater in the top 10. And again, another thing to point out too is this is a deep secondary class. So if the Cowboys really feel that, picking a guy like Rashawn Slater at 10 that is an immediate starter, and they can wait for a corner, and Caleb Farley is obviously a stud. Caleb Farley, Sean Wade's moving way down on people's lists. Pat Surtain, I'm really, really confused as to why he's dropping. I haven't really found much as to reasons why he's dropping. And then again, you see a lot of these players fall for no reason. And then someone else tweeted Kyle Pitts to the Cowboys, which would be very, very scary. But yeah, I mean, we'll get more in depth with the Cowboys when we go into this. But yeah, I mean, Jeff, I fully agree with you that this is a very, very crucial draft. And I said this last or during this past season, before the trade deadline, the Cowboys need to trade Leighton Vander Esch. He is Sean Lee 2.0. They need to trade him right now while he has this high value and he's young right now.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, I think all of this comes down on Jerry Jones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's always an issue to me when owners get involved with how the team is run. I think that if you're an owner in the NFL, unless you're like this brilliant football mind, get a GM and get the hell out of his way. Because otherwise, I think you get situations with guys like Jerry Jones who let's face it, Jerry Jones has always had a little bit of an ego about him.
Mm-hmm.
He always has done what I would consider to be the sexy draft picks, or make the sexy move in the offseason and worry less about balancing his team, frankly put. Because, you look at this team right now, the offense is about as good as you can get in the NFL for who they have and who they're paying. But then on the defensive side, it's just a mess. So I just don't know with Jerry Jones. That's my biggest thing.
See, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the big thing too is I think the Cowboys are also a team that they're lucky they play in the NFC East.
Yeah.
Because, Philly's in this rebuild mode. And, now that to me, and I was talking to Darius about this, fellow member of the Blitz, because he's a big Eagles fan. Now that Carson Wentz is gone, because, Darius has been telling me for months and months on end now that, if they hire Nick Sirianni, the Philadelphia Eagles, he believes that this is to fix Carson Wentz. And now that Carson Wentz is gone, to me, that doesn't, and Darius as well, that coaching staff, Nick Sirianni hire makes no sense. And then you have Jeff Lurie coming out earlier this week and saying that he is in love with Jalen Hurts and he wants the team to build around him. Again, I don't know how much we're going to take that seriously. You're still seeing tons of mocks with Mac Jones, Trey Lance, Justin Fields with the 6th overall pick. But, the Eagles are going into rebuild mode. I think the Dallas Cowboys, I don't think they're in rebuild, but I think they're far from competitive. And the Giants are, still building. And, Golden Tate got cut, so now they're still trying to find, their wide receiver one, whoever they bring in, if it's a guy like Kenny Golladay, who did not end up getting tagged by the Detroit Lions. And like I said, I think the NFC East, the division was pathetic. It was a joke this year. You have a team that came into the playoffs as a sub 500 team. Washington, if they figure out their quarterback situation, because Alex Smith was cut, they re-signed Taylor Heineke, but it'll be very interesting. And, I was talking to one of my friends a while ago before Dak signed this contract, is I would love Dak Prescott over in Washington. That would be such a fun offense to watch. They don't have many receivers outside of Terry McLaurin, but that defense is absolutely up and coming. But I'm sorry to interrupt, Jeff, but please continue to what you were going to say.
No, it's fine. I think I actually would like to build off of that with just the NFC East this year. I think, as you said, the Cowboys are very lucky to be in the position they're in, where let's face it, last year was worst case scenario for them. They started off the season, even before Dak got hurt, they didn't look good. Dak goes down. So there's an excuse right there. Well, we didn't have our quarterback. Next thing, first year head coach. Well, it was his first year in the system. And now third, they get lucky, or I don't want to say lucky, but they have the NFC East, which was by far the worst division last year. Looks to be, once again, I would say, the worst division this year. So if the Cowboys can be half competent this year, they can take the NFC East and get a playoff spot. And luckily for Mike McCarthy, probably save his job in that case, because I think we can all agree that he's on the hot seat this year after what happened last year, even though Dak did go down.
I fully agree. And actually, as we're live here, we do have a breaking news signing from the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans have signed Mark Ingram to a one-year deal up to $3 million. So now you've got the 1-2 punch with David Johnson and Mark Ingram. They did cut Duke Johnson. So, that's their 1-2 punch, which to me isn't that bad. I looked at a team like the Miami Dolphins if they decided not to pay for a running back. Aaron Jones has been a guy that's been linked to the Miami Dolphins for quite some time now. I think the Dolphins should go after Corey Linsley if they decide to go a little bit in the cheaper route for a running back. But breaking news out of Houston now, per Adam Schefter 8 minutes ago. Houston Texans have signed running back, former Ravens and Saints running back Mark Ingram to a 1-year deal worth up to $3 million.
Wow. I actually like that signing a lot for them. Because, I mean, let's face it, David Johnson is not what he used to be. And Mark Ingram gives him a nice power back to sort of, those third downs, third and shorts, to really give him like a hard-nosed edge to this offense, which with David Johnson they definitely didn't have. So I think that's actually a great move for them. Only paying $3 million, I think, on a 1-year deal, just to see if it works out. I think that's great for them.
Yeah, I fully agree. Let's dive into this, franchise tag. So we'll go deeper into this free agency talk, when free agency officially starts. But yeah, let's go deeper into this franchise tag. So, the one I want to start with, which is the one I really didn't understand fully, was Chris Godwin. And, to me, Antonio Brown's a free agent. And I think that Antonio Brown has so many off-field issues. And yes, you can tell he is trying. And, Bruce Arians said at the beginning of the season he is on this team until evidence is proven otherwise. And, I just don't know how much attention he's going to get in free agency. So I think I think the Buccaneers would have been smarter to bring him back and, tag a guy like, Shaq Barrett, because Shaq Barrett's probably heading to free agency now because he's probably not going to want to play under a second franchise tag. We've gone through this running back shelf life. They have Leonard Fournette because Rojo didn't get tagged. And to me, Rojo really didn't do anything until this season, in my opinion. And I know Bruce Arians was a big Rojo guy, and they went out and signed Shady McCoy, and Bruce Arians was saying, "Oh, we want Shady McCoy to be a big part in this offense." He barely played a snap. Think about this too. The past 2 seasons, LaShawn McCoy got 2 rings from 2 Super Bowl rings. He didn't play a snap against the Chiefs, and he didn't play a down against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That is just living life right there, man. I don't know what to tell you there.
That's like who is it? Is that Patrick McCaw in the NBA?
Yep.
3 years straight.
Yep.
Yeah, the same thing.
Exactly. I mean, I can't complain. Then you got J.R. Smith even this year, picked up on waivers to go wherever LeBron's going, just a ring chaser. Hey, I mean, if I'm that guy, I'm not complaining. But they also drafted Keyshawn Vaughn, rookie coming into his second year now, out of Vanderbilt. So I mean, I think if the Buccaneers were smart, they should have let Godwin walk. You saw a lot of production out of Tyler Johnson, and I really don't think Chris Godwin did a whole lot in the playoffs. And I just didn't see them paying, or at least trying to pay, 2 receivers. So I don't know if yeah, I mean that is the one big one that just did not make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I would say it mainly didn't make sense because of Shaq Barrett. They had the dilemma with I don't know why the name is escaping me. Levante David, right? They had this whole conundrum where you have to pay Levante David, Shaq Barrett, and pretty much, I mean, let's face it, that defensive line is probably the reason why they won that Super Bowl. I mean, they were constantly getting to Mahomes. Dude was running for his life out there. Granted, they didn't have either of their tackles, but still, major reason why they won that Super Bowl. And by not tagging Barrett, you're pretty much admitting defeat, letting him walk. And I think, as you said, I think that Tampa Bay is just fine at receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And even people were talking about Scotty Miller last year, super fast wide receiver. So, yes, is Chris Godwin good? Yes. Is he worth the tag for the Bucs? I don't think so. Mainly just because they already have Mike Evans, who I think at the end of the season was really clicking with Brady.
Oh yeah.
I think he had his issues earlier in the season. They just didn't have their chemistry, whatever. That's what happens when you don't have an off season. But I just didn't really see that same connection with Chris Godwin at all. He's got a history of drops. We know that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm in agreement with you here. I think it was just really weird considering the situation that they're in.
Yeah, and like the thing about Mike Evans too is I don't want to say he's slept on just because, he is a top 7 receiver, but I think he gets overlooked because of the team he's on. Other besides this season, he's eclipsed 1,000 yard receiving seasons ever since he's entered the league out of Texas A&M. So I mean that, and I just do not see them paying 2 wide receivers. They should have. Levante David doesn't surprise me. I expected the tag on maybe Levante David and a guy like Shaq Barrett because if you look at Tampa's defense, um, they're not getting any younger. And Ndamukong Suh is a free agent. Will they, I've seen a lot of Christian Barmore mocks, or even Levi Wuzurike, big defensive tackle because they don't have a lot of defensive tackle talent. So if Tampa drafts a D tackle, you bring in a guy like Levi Wuzurike or Jay Tafel or even Jalen Twyman or Tyler Shelvin in the later rounds. Why not bring back Ndamukong Suh on a minimum deal? I wouldn't give Ndamukong Suh personally any more than a minimum deal. I think he's washed. I think he's a nice depth piece. But why not? Why not learn and be a rotational depth piece alongside a guy like that? And again, Levi Wuzurike went to Washington with Vita Vea, so that would be a really nice, fun duo to watch again. But yeah, I mean, we're both in agreement there on that one.
Yeah, and I think very similar to the Cowboys, I think this is another very important a team that has another very important draft coming up for them because with the signings of Levante David tagging Godwin, they don't have a lot of money to play with the cap. I think they still have to get under the cap as of right now. But this is going to be another very important draft for the Buccaneers. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. So I wanted to shift gears to another guy who got franchise tagged. And I think this was actually probably my favorite franchise tag out of the whole group. And that is Allen Robinson for the Chicago Bears.
Yep.
I mean, he was going to hit free agency and go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Let's face it. I mean, getting balls thrown to you from Mitch Trubisky for 2 years he was there, 3 years?
Oh yeah,
Something
man.
like that.
Allen Robinson, because he got traded from Jacksonville, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he hasn't had a good quarterback ever. You could argue. I mean, we don't even know what his high school quarterback was, but his Penn State QB was Christian Hackenberg, and then he had Blake Bortles throwing him the ball, and then he's got Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky, and he is still a top 10 wide receiver. So if you put him on a team, if the Bears figure out their QB situation, I don't think they're getting Russell Wilson. So Bears fans, you can stop getting your hopes up there. But because I think Trubisky's going to get a 1-year prove it deal, and him and Nagy are going to hit the hay after next season. But yeah, I mean, I was a little bit surprised just because I expected A-Rob to leave. But on the Bears side of things, it really doesn't surprise me at all because Anthony Miller is also up for a new deal. You cut Anthony Miller or you let Anthony Miller walk and A-Rob walk, your wide receiver one is a second-year wide receiver, Daryl Mooney, who showed a lot of promise, but he hasn't shown enough to be a solidified premier starting one receiver or starting wide receiver. But yeah, and like you said, like this A-Rob was going to hit free agency, and they were talking about contracts having a little bit of disputes in the extension talks, throughout the season. So it was looking very likely that he was most likely going to head out into free agency. So to me, on the Bears side of things, it makes sense and it doesn't surprise you. It's the most reasonable um, tag on the Bears side.
Yeah, definitely. And like you were saying with Anthony Miller, I don't think he's going to come back because
Yeah.
he even had a lot of issues with the Bears last year. He was very vocal and very verbally upset with the Bears. Looking at his body language for the very few games that I saw of the Chicago Bears, because let's face it, who would torment themselves by watching the Bears last year? It didn't look good. And obviously the biggest issue with the Bears is their offense. That defense, it's as with most defenses in the NFL, you only have a 2 or 3 year window with them, of which the Bears have pretty much wasted all of them. So I think that the Bears really have to focus on getting their offense right. And I think bringing back A-Rob is the first step in getting it right.
Yeah, I fully agree. And, I think the next one we're going to talk about here, because we don't need to go too in depth with some of these, but the next one I want to talk about is a little bit surprised by, but at the same time, they need a tackle, and that's Cam Robinson out of Jacksonville. Because the Jags they have 2 first-round picks, because one of them came from the Jamal Adams trade, so one of them was supposed to be Seattle's. And they also have the first pick of the second round from want to say it was the Yannick trade, from the Minnesota Vikings. And is it the Vikings? Yes, it is the Vikings. So yes, the Jets have a lot of draft capital, but the Jags have not only a ton of cap space, but also a ton of draft capital. So if you have Cam Robinson as one of your offensive tackles, you draft an offensive tackle, because I think this tackle class is deep, but I think it's very similar to last year where it's the talent is going to go away quick. And Clemson had their pro day. You look at a guy like Jackson Carman, a guy that's got a lot of upper body strength, very explosive. He's quick with his feet. You look at a lot of versatility in him, the guy that you could potentially kick into guard. And the last first round tackle I remember them drafting was Juwan Taylor out of, I believe it was Florida. So I mean, the Jags need help on their offensive line, and they also James Robinson had a lot of promise as an undrafted rookie. I forget where he was out of, but you have Urban Meyer coming in. It's looking very likely they're going to have Trevor Lawrence. They need to do everything possible to protect that, to protect the potential potential, franchise turnaround for Duval in Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is definitely a surprising franchise tag. I think everybody can see that. Mm-hmm. But I guess when you dig a little deeper, I like the move, because I like them sort of saying with this move, hey, we're going to have a new quarterback come in, and we don't want him to get killed. Like Joe Burrow last year was a prime example of that, where, I mean, literally got his knee snapped in half because his line couldn't protect him. So I think if you do this, and then if you're able to draft a guy in the second round with that next pick, like maybe like Samuel Cosmi, if he's still there, even Dylan Reduns, if he's still there, something like that. I think that would be a great move for them to really just shore up this offensive line, keep Trevor Lawrence safe. You really don't want to have another Joe Burrow, Josh Rosen situation, although I don't really know if there's any helping Josh Rosen, but he did get hit a lot when he played with the Cardinals.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, Cam Robinson's Pro Football Focus stats as well, shows a lot of reliability. Played 973 snaps throughout 2020. Tied for 19th in penalties, allowed 5 penalties. Tied for 12th, which is a little bit in the higher range. Allowed 5 sacks throughout the season. So you're seeing a lot of, slow progression out of Cam Robinson. And if they decide to draft an offensive tackle, and I'm glad you brought up Sam Cosmi as well, because Texas also had their pro day. I have to pull up the number here because, Sam Cosmi went off on the bench. And another guy 36 reps on the bench today, Texas pro day. And I feel like I've heard a lot of, very lopsided opinions on Sam Cosmi, because I was listening to, the first draft podcast with Mel Kiper Jr., Todd McShay, and Field Yates. And, Mel Kiper Jr. was saying that, I see Sam Cosmi as a guy who also opted out during the Big 12 season this past year, that, potentially could have stayed back a year and improved his draft stock. And even Dylan Raduns, Dylan Raduns could be a very early to mid-second round pick out of North Dakota State. Showed a lot of promise in the Senior Bowl. He really, really held his own ground. So I like both of those names that you brought up. Sam Cosmi potentially could be a first-round pick, but I don't believe. Oh, actually, North Dakota State's pro days tomorrow, and Denver has the 9th pick. I'm not sure why Denver, in my opinion, is going for drafting a quarterback. I was talking to Darius about this as well. I mean, to me, Denver is. They haven't banked ever since losing Peyton Manning. after their Super Bowl run, they haven't quite found their draft running back. So they need to go. I think they need to go out and sign a guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick, or if Alex Smith stays around, which I would be surprised, but it would be really cool to see a guy like Alex Smith be another Ryan Fitzpatrick. And Chase Daniel is garnering attention from from other teams, from the Detroit Lions, because he has also been a quarterback that has been seen as a mentor for the younger guys.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how their quarterback situation plays out. Will they let it ride with Drew Lock? Will they bring in a veteran to help him out, mentor him? Or if, a guy like Trey Lance is available, do they draft him, let him sit for a couple years on the bench? It'll be interesting to see what Denver does. So going back to more franchise tag guys, another one that got tagged, another tackle, was Taylor Moton from the Carolina Panthers. 26 years old. I think this was a great tag for the Panthers because I do think that he would have left in free agency and gotten paid somewhere else. Just looking at Pro Football Focus, had an 81.2 on his grade this last year. Played just over 1,000 snaps. The dude is reliable. He's one of the young up-and-coming tackles in the NFL. And it's a good thing that they tagged him because I think Russell Okung is probably not going to be there next year. Get a little too old, and I think that they can save some money by letting him walk or cutting him, whatever his situation is there. But yeah, I think this was a great tag by Carolina.
Yeah, and another thing to point out too is, yes, this guy wasn't Taylor Moton good, but the Panthers at one point also had Trey Turner, and they also traded him to the Los Angeles Chargers, and now people are writing articles that, Trey Turner, an offensive guard now with the Chargers, that's an $11.3 million cap hit, and now, he potentially is a cut candidate, trade candidate. You're seeing a lot of these tackles. Trent Williams, I believe, is up. I want to say that the Niners were fielding offers. I think he's up. I thought he had a year left, but Trent Williams was traded during the draft. I want to say it was day 3 of the draft in 2020, but Taylor Moton to me makes a lot of sense. And it's going to be interesting to see what Carolina ends up doing with their quarterback situation. Could this be a very, very minor potential move to, go and trade for Deshaun Watson? I still personally believe the San Francisco 49ers need to bring in Deshaun Watson. Because they have Jason Verrett, but I think he's going to stay. I think Richard Sherman's gone. But I think a fully healthy 49ers team, yes, even with Jimmy Garoppolo, who I think is a top 25 quarterback, I don't think that's the Rams' division to lose. And we don't need to go too in-depth with the Stafford trade, but I think if the Rams don't win the Super Bowl in the next 2 years, that trade's going to look very, very bad. And I could potentially, this might be a hot one, and I was talking to Darius about this too, we potentially could see Sean McVay on the hot seat if we don't see a Super Bowl appearance the next 2 seasons from the Rams, especially now that Stafford came out a few days after that trade and said they're not re-signing him after his contract. They're going to let him ride out his 2 years. So that very well could change if he goes off, has a potential MVP, top 10 elite football season. But yeah, I mean, I'm very interested to see what the Panthers do because Teddy Bridgewater played very well. And, the first 3, 4, 5 games of the season, and yes, the Panthers might have the 7th, 8th overall pick. This is the 8th overall pick right after the Lions. But they surprised a lot of people during the season, and even Teddy Bridgewater. And, Teddy Bridgewater, I thought, was a lot better than people were giving him credit for. Yes, Deshaun Watson is an upgrade, and we most likely will not see the Panthers go full defense under second-year head coach now to Baylor, Matt Rule, but I'm very interested to see how their quarterback situation pans out coming into week 1 of 2021 season.
Yeah, I think that's one of the more underrated storylines of this offseason is how do they go about it? Because I think, like you said, the Panthers really surprised a lot of people last year. I think they were not on the same level as the Dolphins were a year before, but I think they're very similar to that, where it's very clear they're ahead of their rebuilding schedule. Things are going a lot better for them than we had anticipated. So it'll be interesting to see if they take a guy like Trey Lance with that number 8 pick that they have, or if they let it ride with Teddy Bridgewater for the next couple of years. I think if you're going to draft a guy like Trey Lance, I think you need to have a veteran quarterback on your team who's been in the league a long time, who's able to teach him a lot of stuff, because obviously coming out of North Dakota State, not really playing that much, he's pretty raw as it comes. Mm-hmm. So I think you need to have a veteran guy in there to teach him the ropes. And I'm not sure if Teddy Bridgewater is the guy you want in the quarterback room teaching Trey Lance. Not a knock on Teddy or anything, but I just don't think he's had the experience as some of the other veteran quarterbacks on the market right now.
And like my thing too is I've always been on the side of the Panthers need to draft Trey Lance, because Teddy Bridgewater is on a 3-year contract. Trey Lance, I could understand being a little bit of a risk of a pick, because like you said, he has not necessarily limited elite tape, because he didn't throw a single interception his season in North Dakota. And I don't care what division you're playing for. If you're playing in D3, you're playing at Wisconsin Whitewater, which is a power winning culture school over at D3 Wisconsin football, or college at the collegiate level. That is darn impressive to not throw a single interception. And I want to say he threw one. I don't recall who they played, but they played one game back in October. But, like I said, I mean, that the North Dakota State's pro day is tomorrow. And, Trey Lance, even Dylan Raduns, Trey Lance is going to be a guy that everyone's going to be keeping an eye on. And if you bring in Trey Lance to Carolina versus giving up, potentially 2 to 3 first-round picks for Deshaun Watson, which, yes, obviously that'd be worth it. I don't even think he's 20. He's not even 26. He's an MVP candidate. You bring in a guy like Trey Lance that sits behind Bridgewater for 2 years. Yes, Bridgewater is not the greatest guy to learn behind. You'd rather have a guy like, Ryan Fitzpatrick, but they gave Bridgewater a decent amount of money. I don't even remember I'm not sure what the cap hit would end up being, the dead cap, if they end up just cutting him.
I think it's around $20 million or something like that.
Right. So I think that's exactly what's going to be stopping them from releasing him. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they should release him. I think for what Teddy is for that team, he's perfect. He is like their perfect bridge quarterback. Right. So when they eventually find the guy they want, and as you were saying, if that guy is Trey Lance, I think it's very easy for them to pull the trigger on that. So I'm not saying I wouldn't want them to draft Trey Lance. I think Trey Lance is a very intriguing prospect, and I think with the right coaching, he can become a top 10, top 5 quarterback in this league. And I think with Matt Rule at the helm, the Panthers are looking pretty good right now. So I wouldn't be entirely opposed to them drafting Trey Lance. I just think it'll be interesting how he turns out under the mentorship of a guy like Teddy Bridgewater. It'll be curious to see how long he sits on the tablet on the sidelines for Trey Lance.
Yep, I fully agree. So before we go into free agents, one very brief one I want to talk about is Marcus Maye. This is a guy that has been consistent ever since, even during the time when the Jets still had Jamal Adams. His Pro Football Focus grade was 82.9 in 2020. Finished with 65 total tackles, which is 27th. 2 picks in the top 15, right at 15. So this guy has screamed consistency, and they also got Bradley McDougald in the trade. I'm going to continue to say this: the Seattle Seahawks were not in a position to be trading for Jamal Adams. Bradley McDougald was not bad. They did not need Jamal Adams, but that's beside the point. I think this makes sense. I could have seen there really isn't any other guy on this team that they could have potentially tagged. I mean, there really is, because, Quinnen Williams is still sitting on his rookie contract. I think they'd be ridiculous and silly. I thought they were ridiculous to even listen for offers for him.
Yes.
But, I mean, Jamison Crowder, I think they'd be stupid to cut him. I think if you trade him, he's going to have late round 6th, 7th round value. But it wouldn't surprise me if he gets cut, because it wouldn't surprise me if no one's going to want him. But, even without with no quarterback throwing in the ball, a struggling quarterback, I should say, because I don't think Darnold is the entire problem, and I think the Jets should roll with Darnold and draft Sewell at 2 or trade down. Jamison Crowder still put up numbers. But, we could potentially see Denzel Mims at, their potential wide receiver 1. Could we see Devontae Smith at 2? I think that would be absolutely ridiculous. But Marcus Maye here, I think, makes sense as well because they're really there's no one else. Like if you have a guy like Quinnen Williams, that if Quinnen Williams is up, I could see them moving the tag over to Quinnen Williams. But Quinnen Williams is still sitting on his rookie contract, so this to me it was the most it made the most sense if they were to use their franchise tag.
Totally. And I think that if you're a Jets fan, this is the first time in a long time you can be excited for the team because they've got a new head coach, Robert Saleh, who we've seen at San Francisco is a defensive mastermind coming in with this defense with some nice pieces such as now, once again, Marcus Maye, Quinnen Williams, you have CJ Mosley coming back after opting out last year. So I think that if you're a Jets fan, coming into the offseason and just the draft and all the room that they have to work with, I think you got to be excited for the first time in a very long time for the Jets.
Yeah, I fully agree. And let's kind of end here on, some key free agents. And, the one I want to start with is Kenny Golladay. And I'm kind of surprised the Lions didn't use the tag on Kenny Golladay because very similar to our points on Allen Robinson, he probably was going to leave. And I think if the Lions were smart, they should have kept him because they don't have a wide receiver 1 now. I think Marvin Jones is also gone, and I don't think he's going to the Rams, but I think he's also gone. But this was a little bit surprising to me. But on Kenny Galladay's sake, I wouldn't want to be in Detroit either. I think Detroit's going to have the number 2 pick in 2022. So they could, be going after a guy. It's very, very early, but they could go after one of my favorite guys in the Pac-12, and that's Kayvon Thibodeaux out of Oregon. He'll be a junior. He was, a top recruit in his recruiting class. Unreal. But back to our points on Kenny Golladay. What were your thoughts on that?
Shocked. I was shocked they didn't tag him. Last year when he was on the field, the Lions were just better, frankly. He was their rock at receiver. He was their no questions asked, undisputed wide receiver 1. And they're just letting him walk now. And I think it's very similar to Allen Robinson, where if you don't tag Robinson, what do you really have to work with? It's kind of the same thing here. Who's their number 1 guy now? Quintez Cephas from Wisconsin? Is he their wide receiver 1 now? I guess, but he was what, a 6th round, 7th round pick? Something like that.
He was a 5th round. He
pick.
had an awful combine. His combine was not good. Doesn't have. I want to say he ran a 4.7 at the combine. Has a ton of athleticism, but he played a lot more than I thought he would have. Because I really didn't think he would see the field much this year, and he did. And he played a lot more than I thought of. But like you said, Quintez Cephas is not a wide receiver 1. And if I'm the Lions, I'm sitting at the 7th pick, and you got a guy like Jalen Waddle on the board, I would not hesitate. And I don't think we've had this conversation yet, Jeff, but I personally think that, and this is, continues to be a discussion until they step foot on the NFL field. I would rather have Jalen Waddle on my NFL team than Devontae Smith.
I think that makes sense. I can totally see the argument for Waddle over Smith. Waddle is your stereotypical NFL wide receiver, right? Especially with his build. Like Devontae Smith, we've all seen a little bit on the skinnier side. People have questions about how that'll translate in the NFL. Will he get handled by these bigger, more physical corners that are coming into the league? But I do think that if you're Detroit now, if Jalen Waddle is available, if Devontae Smith, whoever your number 1 wide receiver is, at that point in the draft, you have to go and get him. Because, like we said, Quintez Cephas, as much as we love him, because we're Wisconsin guys, we love Quintez, he's not a wide receiver 1.
Yeah. And, I think very similar to the Eagles, and because the Eagles don't have a true linebacker, the Eagles, I think, if they got Smith and Chase, I absolutely think they need to take Jamar Chase. But I'm looking at 2 players for the Detroit Lions, potentially 3 because Devontae Smith wouldn't be a bad option either. I'm looking at Micah Parsons as well. And Micah Parsons has been a guy that has been dropping for quite some time now, past few weeks now, because of his off-field character issues. I want to say has had to do with a little bit of his maturity. But Micah Parsons is arguably, in my opinion, the top 5, the top 7 prospect in this draft. And if he falls out of the top 10, I'd be surprised. But if people view that as character issues, I would understand that a little bit more than a guy like Pat Surtain. To me, Pat Surtain as well, top 10 prospect easily in my opinion. If Pat Surtain falls outside of the top 10, unless for the reasoning of we see so many trades in the top 10, like 2 or 3 for quarterbacks, I will be shocked. I will be very shocked. But, is Detroit going to decide to go with their 7th pick? Or is it 7 or 8? I don't recall. I think it's 8. Are they going to decide to, build on it with a receiver? Are they going to start their draft and their offseason with a receiver? Or are they going to start on the opposite side of the ball because their defense was more of a problem than their offense? And they had a defensive-minded coach in Matt Patricia for the past 2-3 seasons who is now back on the Patriots coaching staff. So to me, I also think Micah Parsons would make a lot of sense in Detroit.
Yeah, totally. They for sure need the help on defense. We'll see how it goes. If they can get some kneecap biters in the building, right, to sort of get behind Dan Campbell's mindset. And I think that's another thing, too, is from the attitude of Dan Campbell, he's obviously a guy who is looking for tough, hard-nosed football players. So it'll be curious to see if he drafts a guy like where he goes with that pick or where the GM goes with that pick. So, go ahead.
I was going to say, I got one thing to say to you, Jeff. Dan Campbell is Adam Gase 2.0, but continue.
Oh, okay. You're going to make a lot of Lions fans mad with that one because they really like Dan Campbell right now.
Yeah, well, because
that's what I've seen from Lions fans.
We're going to break knees. I know a lot of Lions fans also wanted Robert Saleh as well, but continue.
Yeah, totally. So moving on to the next key free agent, I think this guy has had a lot of discussion around him, and that is former Packers running back, Aaron Jones. He had 3,000 yards last season, 30 touchdowns, or last 2 seasons, pardon me. Really, it was very interesting last year in the draft. We saw the Packers take A.J. Dillon, and everybody kind of scratched their head like, what? And then as we saw the season go on, it started to make more sense. We saw A.J. Dillon, especially when it got a little colder out, get more reps. Obviously, the Tennessee Titans game, he really popped off there. So it'll be interesting to see where Aaron Jones goes. I personally do not think he's going to come back to the Packers. And if I was Brian Gutekunst, I wouldn't want him back, at least for the money that he's going to be asking for. I would roll with A.J. Dillon and potentially try to bring Jamal Williams back in on a smaller contract. Where do you think that Aaron Jones is going to go, or do you think he should come back to the Packers?
Yeah, so I would have been very upset if the Packers had used their franchise tag on Aaron Jones. They offered him top 5 running back money. I want to say it was either late in the season or like during the playoffs, and he turned it down and he fired his agent. Jamal Williams had the same agent as Aaron Jones, also fired his agent, and Jamal Williams wants to be on the Packers long term. Some people are saying, "Oh, this is ridiculous. This is a dumb move." Other people are saying, it was the right move. I personally think they should have tagged Corey Linsley. I'm very surprised to see that, and like that you brought up the A.J. Dillon pick, Jeff, because I know very few people that were ecstatic about the pick, and I can understand maybe the position of where they were picking him because they did pick him in the second round, and Goot believed that he did not think A.J. Dillon would slide to their, I think it was in the 90s, 92nd, 93rd, 96th pick, when they ended up picking Josiah DeGuara. But it makes a lot of sense because you're sitting in this position right now. Every Packer fan is probably really glad. I know I am still to this day that we have A.J. Dillon. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting in this situation. But however, with the 29th overall pick, I would not I would not complain with Mr. Travis Etienne, my running back one. I can understand would that be a little bit of a reach, but I personally believe that a cornerback and a linebacker, because I think they need to go back and watch the Super Bowl and realize that Devin White, linebackers truly matter. Devin White has all-pro talent written all over him, but I like the Dolphins fit. You're seeing a lot of Dolphins rumors. I also like the Jets fit. And because the Jets, he's going to go where the money is. And it explains, it makes a lot of sense why we're seeing, the Dolphins and potentially the Jets. I think we've seen a lot more rumors of the Dolphins come up. I've also seen the Cardinals, which would make a lot of sense. And we can get to them like when we get to them, but they brought in J.J. Watt. The NFC West is not getting any weaker, and it keeps getting stronger. But could you potentially see 3 teams out of the West in the NFC next season make the playoffs? But beside the point, I like the Dolphins. I also like the New York Jets fit a lot, and he's gonna go where the money is.
Yeah, I think that's apparent because, like you said, he was offered top 5 running back money and declined it. So I think that's very telling of what he thinks that he is worth. And he's probably going to get the money that he wants from a team like the Dolphins or the Jets. I think that the Dolphins are probably the most likely candidate at this point in time. We'll see how things develop there. But I don't know. How do you feel about paying running backs? Because I have never been the biggest proponent of paying your running backs big time money.
Yeah, and like I said, the shelf life of running backs has averaged out to about 3-4 seasons. And I fully agree that I think the Packers should keep Jamal Williams, but I would not be opposed to letting both walk. And Jamal Williams the past season has developed into an all-around back. He might not be this Jamal Williams speed and shifty guy, but he has developed into an all-around back. And you look at AJ Dillon, he wasn't utilized a ton in the passing game at Boston College, but that's because you didn't see a ton of of involvement in the passing game from those Boston College running backs. But I am with you there, and I fully believe that guys like Travis Etienne and Najee Harris are first round talent. Are they solidified first round prospects right now? I don't think so. And I think, Darius brought up a great point. The NFL is probably going to use the recency bias for guys like Najee Harris and Travis Etienne. I think I'd rather have Etienne. Etienne put on about 10, 15 pounds, ran a 4.40 unofficial 40 time at his Clemson Pro Day today. And he was utilized more in the passing game than he ever has been, so that could have been a big factoring reason why he ended up surprisingly going back to Clemson, because I still believe he would have been the best back in the 2020 class. Yes, better than Jonathan Taylor, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if Najee Harris is the first back off the board in April over Etienne, because Etienne didn't have the best season, had a little bit of fumble issues midway through the season, but I'm with you there, Jeff. I don't believe in paying running backs. You're seeing Alvin Kamara got paid. There's a few teams where I really didn't think they had a choice. You're looking at the Panthers, Christian McCaffrey. You're now looking at the New Orleans Saints, paid Alvin Kamara, and their biggest dead cap hit right now is Michael Thomas. I believe it's at $18 million. I had seen that earlier today. And there was one more I was thinking of. Oh, it was Dalvin Cook. Because they had drafted Alexander Madison. Yes, he's not an RB1, but they had drafted him because they saw a lot of similar skill sets to Dalvin Cook. Yes, less polished, obviously, but yeah. I think there's very few teams in the NFL that they just didn't have a choice, and I think the top of the list is the Carolina Panthers with Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I would say it's very hard to justify paying running backs big money in today's NFL, especially with how pass focused everything is becoming and how much we're finding out your quarterback really makes or breaks your team. CC Chicago Bears. But here's the one thing I will say in defense of Aaron Jones. We've seen he's very good in the passing game, so he can be utilized as, an all-around runner. Maybe he's not as powerful as you would like, but he's a smaller guy, so it makes sense. Also, he's only 26 years old. We usually see with running backs 29, especially I think you're at age 30, especially. I remember watching a video where like the statistics between age 29 and age 30 backs, it like completely drops off a cliff. So if you can get Aaron Jones, this young running back who can really help you out in the passing game, I think I can see teams justifying paying the price tag for a guy like Aaron Jones.
Right. And I think it's going to be obvious. I think wherever team he signs, I definitely feel like, seeing as the Packers did offer him top 5 running back money, it's not going to be too surprising the team wherever team he goes to. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right. I think we could probably cover one more guy if you had anyone else in mind.
Yeah, so there were two, and I'll let you choose. There was Will Fuller and there was Hunter Henry. Which one would you like to cover?
Those are both very, very interesting choices. Let's talk about Hunter Henry. Let's talk about him.
Yeah, I mean, Hunter Henry got the franchise tag by the Chargers this year, and you saw a lot more of involvement from Mike Williams. So I think, because Mike Williams is also up, and I think if the Chargers are smart, they didn't use their tag on either of those guys. Um, I think I thought he was up. He is up because he was in the same draft class as Corey Davis. He is up. And I think if the Chargers are smart, I think they keep Mike Williams. Because you saw a lot of connection with Mike Williams and Justin Herbert over in LA. But Hunter Henry played under the franchise tag, was still good, didn't do a ton. Um, I'm looking at a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars because I don't see them. They have the first pick. They're going Trevor Lawrence, and their next pick's in the 20s. I don't see Kyle Pitts being available unless you have a guy like Kyle Pitts, or you decide with the 33rd pick, in the second round of the draft, day 2, you go after a Penn State guy like Pat Fryermuth, a versatile guy that can be a weapon for you, as well as a guy in your backfield as a playmaker. But I really think that they should go after Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry, or even a guy like Jonnu Smith, which I was a little bit surprised about that we didn't see a lot of contract talks between him and the Titans. But I like Hunter Henry a lot on the Jaguars.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And as you were saying with the Chargers, Mike Williams was awesome for them last year. He was really that deep threat guy. I don't remember what game it was, but I remember Justin Herbert throwing up this ball to him on a 9 route and just going up and getting it. He is the perfect complement there for Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's, working the inside, a lot of slants, things of that nature. Mike Williams is your go deep guy. And I think it was hard for them to justify bringing back Henry. He was good, but I think he sat out a couple of games last year because I think he did get hurt some more.
Yep.
So I think it's going to be interesting to see what team is going to look at him because he's only 26 years old. What teams are going to be like, okay, let's take a chance on this guy because he's going to want big money. I mean, that's been made apparent from last year when he got tagged as well. So I think that the Jaguars are a good spot, but I'm honest, it's hard to find a good place for him where the amount of money that he's going to want is going to be validated or worth that big contract.
And I'm glad we talked about tight ends. We don't need to go into any of the other ones, but I'm glad we talked about tight ends and picked Hunter Henry because this offseason, it's going to be very interesting to see the amount of tight end moves because you're seeing Dallas Goedert. He's turned into the number 1 guy. Zach Ertz is a regressing tight end, but he's going to have some sort of trade value to him. It's looking very likely Zach Ertz will be out of Philly. You look at Jonnu Smith. You look at Kyle Rudolph, who's been linked to the Cleveland Browns to reunite with Kevin Stefanski. He wants to play for the Patriots. I feel like I'm missing one more. Evan Ingram, I definitely feel like that's a guy whose value I think has plummeted a little bit because it's a guy that has struggled to stay healthy. So I'm very intrigued to see where these tight ends end up in free agency and trades because Zach Ertz has to be traded.
Yeah, there's a lot of tight ends that are going to be on the move, like you said. And I feel like teams are starting to sort of value the tight end again a little bit. We're obviously seeing a lot of spread offenses now. in the NFL, but you're seeing guys like George Kittle, especially, these big time blocking, going to go hit you in the mouth sort of tight ends. I think that the sort of blocking tight end is coming back into style a little bit. It's not fully there. You obviously want a guy, like if you can get a guy like Travis Kelce, I think you'll be okay with that. Or even a guy like Kyle Pitts, who isn't your ordinary tight end. Some people have even gone as far to call him just a large wide receiver in this class, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with the tight ends in this offseason.
And another one, too, I'm just going to throw this name out there because he might not be back in Green Bay. He's a restricted guy, and that's Robert Tonyan. So lots of intriguing names, and, he's going to have a lot of value to him coming into the offseason if he's not back in Green Bay.
Yeah, he was a sneaky guy. He ran under a lot of people's radars because I expected Jay Sternberger to do something this year. That didn't really happen. But yeah, I think Robert Tonyan is a guy the Packers should look into bringing back if they can get him for the right price, because they're obviously dealing with salary cap issues of their own.
I agree, and they have both him and Lazard as restricted. I thought that they were going to end up bringing both, but I would let Lazard walk and keep Tonyan, because this is the last point I wanted to bring up before we kind of wrap things up here. Besides the quarterback position, I arguably think that the tight end position is probably one of, if not the hardest positions to learn in the NFL, because outside of guys like Gronk at the time, George Kittle, I wouldn't even put Kittle on that list, and Travis Kelce, because I don't say Kittle because Kittle is just now starting to flourish into a top 2, top 3 tight end. And now you're starting to see more tight ends really flourish onto their team's offense, guys like Mark Andrews and guys like Darren Waller. But yeah, that's just the last point I wanted to bring up here.
Yeah, totally. It seems like tight ends are kind of at a premium right now in the NFL a little bit, at least for what teams are looking for. So it's going to be very interesting free agency this year for sure. I think that's going to do it for this episode of The Blitz. Thank you all for tuning in and listening. You can find all the socials in the description down below. What do we got planned for next episode, Sam?
So next week, we're going to be covering, previewing the offseason of, all 32 NFL teams leading up to the draft. So we're going to be starting off with, haven't decided yet if we're going to, kind of go division by division, or even, the first round draft order, kind of starting very, very briefly with the first 10 teams of the NFL, of the NFL draft that are picking. So they're very excited to break down that one.
Yeah, it should be a fun episode for sure. Once again, Sam Dehring, co-host. My name is Jeff Anderson. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We will see you on the next episode.